Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities, and we do this a number of different ways. This show is one of them. I also have my first book out there. It's called SOAR, SOAR. It's actually behind me, and it's on Amazon, and it's an experiential journey through a transformative event in my life and shows how I partnered with the universe to get to a place of soaring. And I believe that anyone can do this regardless of what their reality is. I'm also an executive coach, so super excited to be doing that. I help high-level executives reach sky-high levels of success in all areas of their life, personal and professional. And also this year, I am adding on public speaking, so super excited to be doing some traveling around that. So we have a great show planned today. We have Monique Rhodes with me. Hey, Monique.
Hi, Pamela. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. Monique is joining us from New Zealand, so that's super cool. Always great to connect with people from all over the world. And before we start talking about your work that you're doing in the world, would like to ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, how do you live authentically every day?
Wow, that's a great question, Pam.
Thank you.
I live authentically by being as conscious as I possibly can be about the habitual places that my mind is going to.
Love that. And so, can you give me some examples of how you do that throughout your day?
Well, I think that what most of us don't realize or understand is that we think we go through our day and we make a whole bunch of decisions about, what we like, what we don't like, the things that we're doing and not doing. And yet most of those things are actually habits. And that's something that we're not really aware of.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of habits in our lives that are super beneficial and powerful. It would be a nightmare if we woke up in the morning and didn't know how to drive our car. We wouldn't be able to get to work. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that we're doing habitually that we're not even aware we are. Our emotional reactions,
Mm-hmm.
the way that we're showing up in the world. We think it's based on the present moment, but it's not actually. It's based on, past habits. And that it really holds us back, because
Mm-hmm.
when we start practicing a thought over and over again, that becomes a belief. And beliefs really drive our life. And it's okay to have beliefs about things as long as those beliefs are conscious. But for most of us, 99% of the time, those beliefs are sitting there unconsciously driving us. Mm-hmm. So for me, living authentically is about starting to look at this honestly and start to begin to understand that a lot of my life is driven on autopilot. Everyone's lives is driven on autopilot, and we don't actually realize it. Does that make sense, Pam?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's just super interesting how much of our lives is driven by our subconscious, and we don't even realize it. We think we're making conscious decisions, but really it's kind of an illusion because there's this whole program running behind the scenes. So what are some factors, I'd like to go a little bit deeper there. What are some factors that play a role in shaping the subconscious and really in shaping those kind of unconscious autopilot habits that we go through every day?
Great question. The way that I like to describe it is like this. There's 8 levels of consciousness, okay? Our first 5 are our senses. So imagine that I held up a flower, and I showed you a flower right now, Pam. And what would happen is that one of the first 5 levels of consciousness would be one of your senses would, in this case, see it. Then what happens is the 6th consciousness kicks in, and the 6th consciousness recognizes it. It says, that's a flower. Now we start to get into the problematic one. That's the 7th consciousness. And the 7th consciousness says, I like it, I don't like it, or I feel negative about it. Mm-hmm. And then the 8th consciousness stores it, a little bit like a piggy bank, or a little bit like an external hard drive on our computer, right? Mm-hmm. What then happens is that I show you this flower. You look at this flower and you say to me, oh, I love that flower. And you think that in that moment you're loving that flower. But if we were to look closely, we might find a past story sitting behind the love for this flower. let's say that past story is actually, when I look closely, I realized that when I was a child, there were flowers like this in my grandmother's garden, and I really loved her. And so without realizing it, these flowers evoke a memory of my grandmother. And this all happens. The shift from the sixth to the seventh consciousness happens instantaneously. Or it might be that you look at this flower and you think, oh, I don't like that flower at all. Equally, it could be that your grandmother was really not a nice person to you. And you see this flower, subconsciously, it's evoking a memory. And so what happens is that if we look at everything that's going on in our life, I'll give you an example. A few months before I left United States, I usually live in the US, but I came home because of COVID. I was in just north of Los Angeles, and I met a woman at a winery. And I was talking to her. She lived in Montana on this big ranch. And after about 20 minutes, she said to me, I'd love to have you come and stay with me on my ranch. And I was very curious. And I said to her, you know, that's wonderful. And I would love to. And I have full intentions of going as soon as I get back. But I also said to her, you know, you've known me for 20 minutes. Why is it that you're inviting this complete stranger to your ranch? And she said to me, well, it's funny you ask that, because you remind me of my sister, and my sister passed away 4 years ago. Oh. So what she was doing was she was seeing qualities of her sister in me, and then creating a story around that I was quite similar to her sister, and would probably then have other expectations of me based on that. It was the eighth consciousness that was storing these memories of her sister that was reminded, you know, when she saw me. And this is how we're living, you know. The moment that we started this podcast, your viewers and listeners know you, you know, the minute that they see me, they make a series of judgments. Might be the sound of my voice. All of a sudden, they remember this Kiwi that they knew that was awesome. Oh, she's a Kiwi. That's so cool. Or a nice memory of New Zealand. And the heart opens. Or maybe they've worked with a New Zealander who was a little bit of a problem for it. And immediately there's a defensiveness that goes up. And this is how we're living through our day without realizing it. And when we start to break this down and look at it and work with it, I believe then we can begin on the journey of living authentically in a deep way. That's the way I look at it, Pam.
Yeah, I love that. So how does one begin to unpack all that? Because I think, you know, it obviously takes a certain level of awareness to even realize that you're kind of transcending, going through these different levels of consciousness. And how does one become aware, stop themselves, reprogram, you know, identify what doesn't serve them, reprogram? And what is the approach for that?
Yeah. The first skill that I teach, that I swear by as my superpower, is actually meditation. I think that meditation is one of the most important things that we can do to help us, because what meditation does is it slows our mind down. So when we go from the sixth consciousness to the seventh, that happens so quickly. It's almost like, you know, when you have your phone is off and someone calls and it goes directly to answer phone. That's how fast that reaction happens. But what meditation does is it teaches us to slow down that place between the stimulus and the reaction. And so over time, slowly, there's this gap that begins to happen between the thought that we usually act on instantly and the reaction. And so that is where meditation is incredibly powerful, because as time goes on, as that gap grows and grows, we start to see, oh, I can have a thought or an emotion or be triggered, and there's this little bit of a gap that's growing. And over time, I start to get to choose my emotional response rather than have it happen automatically. I mean, meditation is really an incredible skill for so many reasons. But when we're looking at this growing awareness, this is how it can be really powerful, because we see, what is my mind doing? Where do my thoughts go to repeatedly? And then we start to see, oh, that's just a habit that my thoughts go here or here. And then we're able to look at that just as a habit of the mind and start to see, oh, when I meet someone new and I have this reaction of, I don't really like them, or I really like them, we start to then be able to see, oh, that's the habit with this type of person. And maybe I can step into being with them in the present moment differently, like being authentically with them rather than running on these past experiences that are unconsciously driving my responses to them.
Mm-hmm. So how do you suggest people get started with meditation? Because I know that can be one, from my experience with working with clients, I know that it can sound intimidating at the beginning. I know it was for me. I was like actually cranky the first couple of times I tried meditating, because I was like, I'm not doing this right. And I'm just not wired to sit still. And, I don't feel productive just sitting here. So it was really hard for me actually to sit there for even just a couple minutes in the beginning. So how do you suggest that people get started?
Yeah, that's really an important thing. Well, first of all, I want to demystify a couple of things about meditation, Pam, because I think that when we hear the word meditation, we go, oh my God, here we go again. Someone else telling me meditation's the answer. I can't do it. My mind's too busy. I don't have time for this. So one of the first things to understand is when we sit down to meditate, we're not trying to remove the thoughts from our mind. And I think this is where a lot of people get blocked, because they try meditation, their minds are super busy, and they go, I can't do this. So the first thing to understand is that when we begin meditation, our minds are going to be so busy, you will die. It'll be like dancing all over the place. But the reason is that you're not used to allowing your mind space. You're not used to allowing it to breathe. And so all of those thoughts that you numb or you run away from by being busy, by social media, whatever it is, all of those things are going to show up because they just want to be seen. And over time, if you just see them and look at them and allow them, they will settle down. And so what happens is when we first start meditation, this mind is so busy and it can make us go, I can't do this. But the person that sits there and says to you, oh, I just meditated for half an hour and I had no thoughts, that's not true. They didn't have no thoughts. They might have been stoned or something. I don't know what it was, but there was no case where someone is sitting, unless they're an enlightened master. There's no case where someone's sitting and just having no thoughts. Our thoughts are as natural a part of our mind as the waves are in the ocean. And if we think about the ocean, what happens is the waves rise up and then they go back in again, right? What we do is a thought arises and we run off after it. We chase it. And that's where we get into trouble. That's where the problems start. So meditation teaches us to allow the thoughts to come, but not to run off and chase them. Instead, it teaches us to bring our mind back to the present moment. We bring it back. We bring it back. And this is very different than what we do. What we're usually doing, Pam, is we're dancing between thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future.
Mm-hmm.
But we think about it like this. The past doesn't exist, and our memory of it is completely subjective. It all depends on where we were as to what we remember. Thoughts of the future, well, that's just fantasy as well. So our thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future, we start to see them, they're just imaginary. The only thing that's real is this present moment. And if we can understand that, what we see in this present moment, if we can learn to bring our mind more and more to be here in the present moment, then our stress and anxiety begins to reduce dramatically, because our mind is no longer dancing between thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future. Pam, I remember when I was younger, I was living in Australia, and there was a woman that I knew who was the cousin of Nicole Kidman. And it was right at the time that Nicole Kidman was about to marry Tom Cruise. And I remember her saying, she went to meet Tom for the first time. And I remember her coming back and me saying to her, what was it like meeting him? And she said, oh my God, he made you feel as though no one else in the world existed.
Wow.
And I found this really fascinating. And I thought about this. I was very young at the time. And I thought about this a lot. And I have seen over the years that what he did was he was able to stay completely present with whoever it was he was talking to. Okay. And I know from, this is something that I've worked very, very hard on. And I know for myself, it's really just a meditation practice. We're practicing bringing ourselves to the present moment and being fully with the person that we're with. Mm-hmm. And if we're able to give that to our employees, to our partners, to our children, our friends, if we're able to be really here in the present moment with them, I don't know there's a greater gift, because we live in a world that's so distracted. If you want someone to know that you care about them, that you value them, that you respect them, then bringing your meditation practice into your daily life is a very powerful way to do it. And one of those ways is when we're in conversation with other people, to put the phone away, put the distractions away, and just, for however long it is, just be there, just listen and be present.
So how often do you recommend that people meditate?
It's not so much to me about how long someone meditates as the offenness. I can't think of the word, but yeah, daily if possible. If you can do it daily. Mm-hmm. The most important thing is to do it consistently, because when we do it consistently, we start to see the shifts and changes. And the reason is this: if I sit down every day at the same time, which I do, and I meditate, mm-hmm. every day I'm going to have a different experience. My mind is going to be some days really relaxed, some days agitated, but that's what life is like. So what I learned to do is every day as I sit and meditate and those different thoughts and emotions come up, one of the first things we want to do is leave. We're like, I don't feel comfortable with these emotions. I don't feel comfortable with these thoughts. But that's what we do in our everyday life. I don't feel comfortable with these emotions or thoughts. Mm-hmm. Let me pick up my phone and see who's texted. Let me pick up my phone and scroll social media. And we wonder why we're hitting a mental health crisis at the moment, where stress, anxiety, and depression are at record levels. We don't know how to deal with our emotions. And so if we practice regularly, what we see on a daily basis is this different landscape that we're working in. And in that different landscape, we learn to stay. Let's say you do a 10-minute meditation every day. And I know 10 minutes doesn't sound like much, but it is enough. Every day you sat for 10 minutes and you meditated. And every day for those 10 minutes, you stayed. At the end of 30 days, you are going to be seeing changes in you without a question. And it may not be you that sees them. It may be someone else in your life that notices. So consistency is a really, really powerful thing in this experience of meditating. And even if you go, I can't do it for 1 minute. Do it for 2 minutes. Build it to 3, 4, 5. You don't have to sit down and meditate for half an hour or an hour every day to see results.
And so what are some of the benefits of meditation? I know you mentioned, lower stress and anxiety, brings you, more clarity, present moment, et cetera. But are there other benefits?
It changes the structure of your brain. So there's a lot of science that was done at UCLA. There was a Tibetan Buddhist monk who went there. A couple of situations that were really famous. One of them was a guy who worked with the Dalai Lama for a long time, and he went in. And when he went in and they did the tests on his brain, he had meditated a lot over many years. When they tested his brain, they put all of the stuff on his head, and they went and reset their equipment because they thought they made a mistake. Because the areas of his brain that contained all of the happiness, were so much larger than they'd ever seen in anybody before. So then they started investigating, and they found that with people who were meditating, they saw actual structural changes in their brain. Wow. If that
Wow.
doesn't get you meditating, I don't know what would,
Right?
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is fascinating.
So, of course, it decreases stress, anxiety, increases your happiness levels. I mean, who doesn't want to be happier? But
Right.
the other things that it does that I see is it changes your relationships, because all of a sudden that reactive self isn't reacting. If
Mm.
you're someone who has a tendency to, be an A-type personality and maybe fly off the handle a little bit, or be a little bit frustrated, or all of that starts to slow down. You become more effective, but without all the kind of chaos and drama that happens. You're able to be more focused. It increases your creativity because the noise starts to settle down in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for me, the benefits have just been phenomenal. I just see it as the singular most powerful skill that you can learn. And anything that helps us be happier, I'm all in with 2 feet. I'm like, because that's what I specialize in, is teaching people how to be happier. And meditation is the very first skill. When we think about it like this, Pamela, like, we wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I put on clean clothes, I take a shower. I love having my space really tidy and clean. I love having my home really tidy and clean. We put a lot of energy into looking after our body and looking after our home and our space. But if we think about it, that's not where we live. We don't live in our home. We don't live in our body even. Where we live is in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when was the last time you cleaned out your mind?
Right. Right.
Right? So we need to put the work into our mind. We're led down this lie that happiness is found in success, wealth, fame, power. But let's look at a lot of the people that have all of that are so unbelievably unhappy. So
Mm-hmm.
when we start to unpick that lie, it doesn't mean that you can't be wealthy. It doesn't mean you can't be successful. But what you have to understand is that your happiness long term, on a level that you can rely on, it doesn't come from that. It doesn't come from the relationship. It doesn't come from the nice car. It doesn't come from the bank balance. Of course, these things give us a period of good feeling, but it doesn't give us long-term happiness. And we know that because what we do is we chase after something, we get it. Okay, now what? And we're on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it's really important for us to understand that we live in a world that leads us to believe that happiness comes from outside of ourselves. But if you really want to be happy, if you want to be well in the world, if you want to be successful and the best CEO or executive, the work needs to be done in the mind. That's where the key lies.
Yeah. Yeah. I echo that wholeheartedly. And that's one of the things I say in my practice too to my clients. It's really a moment to moment practice of training the mind. I mean, that's really where the answer is. It's a process that needs to happen from the inside out. Because like you said, when we're constantly relying on other things outside of ourselves, things in the external world for happiness, it's fleeting. It might sustain us for a little while, but it doesn't provide the long lasting, sustaining energy that we can derive when we do the work from the inside. So yeah, I just think that's such an important point. So what are some other ways? I know you mentioned meditation is a big part of your practice and what you teach your clients, but what are some other, maybe just a few other ways that you help other people achieve happiness on a more permanent basis?
I think one of the things that it's really important to think about when we're again looking at this deeper meaning and is to look at our beliefs. I think that most people don't understand, if they're blocked, there's a belief that is holding them back. I had an example the other day. Was I was coaching a team, and two people came into the class late. One of them came in full of shame, and the other one came in shamelessly. And it was really intriguing. And I used it as an example to teach. And I was like, okay, so this person has come in full of shame. What is that shame? Well, I don't like to be late. I find it disrespectful to you and the work that we're doing together. And I feel really bad and I'm really sorry. And the other one was like, yeah, I'm late and I'm so grateful that I managed to make it, because I didn't think I was going to make it at all. There was only one thing that was different between those two people, and that was the belief that they came in with. One came in with the belief as I deserve to be here. I'm really grateful that I made it. The other one came in like, it's shameful that I'm here late. Mm-hmm. So when we look at, whenever I'm coaching someone, the first thing that we do is we look at what is the major belief that is underlying, that is holding you back. I can usually get to it within 10 minutes. With every single person, there is one belief that really holds them back. And if you can get to that and you can figure that out and start to work with that, things start to break open, because it's just stories that we're telling ourselves. I tell myself certain stories because I'm a white woman who grew up in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And that's just the truth. There's a whole bunch of things that I have been led to believe about myself because of that. And I think it's really interesting when we start to again look at this consciously, is what are the beliefs that hold me back and how can I start to unravel them and work with them? I think that's a really powerful piece of work for us to do.
I agree. Yeah. And that really is key, just doing that deeper work at the belief level. Because I think the issue is that, we're just conditioned to chase like the action or the behavior, try to fix the habit, right? That's why New Year's resolutions don't stick, right? Because people they haven't identified, or they haven't anchored on that core belief, like that feeling that they really want to embody. And they're just so focused, they jump in too late. I think they focus kind of on the action and how to change that. But if you go deeper and look at the belief and get to the root of it, then, you no longer have to like labor to go through to pick the right habits, go through the actions, because it's intrinsic. It's a new part of how you are, how you're made up. It's you literally, change your programming and you're naturally drawn towards different things.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And again, remembering, Pam, that we're habitual, as we're talking about. So we have a tendency just to, keep repeating things over and over again. What is, someone once said to me, there's this brilliant quote that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So it's important for us to look at what are the results I want. Okay, I've been down this path before, it's not working. We can easily cut the leaves or the branches off a tree, but really the work is going in deeply and going to the root. Let's look at the root of the problem. I promise you, every time the root of the problem is going to be something that is going on in your mind. And if you can get to know your mind better, then you're able to see more easily what those things are.
Yeah. Well said. So I know we're unfortunately almost about out of time here, but I wanted to give you a couple minutes here to wrap up, and I'll give you the floor to talk about whatever you'd like to, whether it's your coaching program, anything else you'd like to promote, and maybe just some final words of wisdom for people. And then lastly, your contact information if they would like to get in contact with you directly.
Thank you, Pam. I think one of the biggest things that I just want to finish by saying is that it is possible for us to take charge of our experience. And I know this because I was a kid who suffered deeply from depression, who's completely turned their life around, to someone who I often say, if I wasn't me, I would be jealous of myself. I've lived an extraordinary life.